Thank you, and thank you very much, Lloyd, for that introduction. And I just want to start by saying thank you to everyone who's turned up. I remember saying at the end of the last conference that everyone should go away, tell their friends what a wonderful time they had, how at this conference everyone was amazing and interesting and smart and beautiful, and it was the best time they've ever had, and that people should definitely come to the next one. I'm glad to see that that worked, and that we now have another bunch of interesting and beautiful and smart and intelligent people to have another day with. I just want to begin by kind of explaining what we mean by the Internet of Agreements, because we've had 3 conferences, or this is the 3rd conference now, on this subject, and I don't think we've ever really spelled it out at the start of any of the conferences, which is probably an oversight on our part. But the concept is really kind of fairly simple. As Lloyd mentioned, we kind of began in 1973 or so with the origins of the internet. A bunch of universities begin to hook their computer networks up to each other, and we get scientists and we get researchers and we get academics all talking to each other, all communicating, and building new services, building new products, building new tools to facilitate that communication. So we get things like email. We get things like FTP to be able to send files around. We get news groups. And what these things have in common is that they're unencrypted for the most part. They're there for the transfer of information, and they're there to facilitate this kind of, the life of the mind. Towards the end of this period, we have a particular researcher at CERN called Tim Berners-Lee, who invents the World Wide Web. And the World Wide Web is an advance over the previous technologies because it's much easier to use, it's more visual, and it's something that regular people can kind of understand. And so you get a major new adoption of the internet by a whole bunch of new people, regular people. And if you're a business, a service like that has a whole bunch of regular people using it looks an awful lot like a market. It looks like people that you can sell to. So we kind of go through a few years of sort of intense development around things like cryptography to be able to get just enough encryption in place that you can send your credit card number across the internet without anybody stealing it. And so we go from a situation where people were mostly exchanging ideas around, completely in the clear with no encryption, to a situation where people are conducting commercial activity. And this requires cryptography. And this gives rise to the Internet of Shopping. So you get the World Wide Web plus some cryptography, and you can now, as a consumer, go to a website, browse a bunch of products, select the product that you like, add it to a shopping basket, go to the checkout, enter your credit card number, and enter your name and address, and complete the purchase. And those goods will then be shipped to you. And this kind of is a very there's a kind of technological determinism at work here, because the technology that we had at that time was a very good fit for that kind of experience. If you think about the experience of going to a shop or going into a supermarket or a clothes store, you browse around, you see what's on the shelves, you see what's available, you have a look at a few things, you decide the things that you like, you put them in a basket, and you take them to the checkout, and you pay for them. And that kind of, browsing around, having a look at things, selecting the thing that you want, going through a checkout process is very well supported by the web. The web browser is a browser. It's for browsing. It's the same activity that you would do in a shop. The thing is that this turns out to be a giant chunk of the economy, like a huge amount of what we actually do in city centers and shopping malls and things like that is exactly that experience. So we've had a kind of the second great age of the internet. After ideas came shopping. And we've done the last 20 years of basically taking anything that you could do with a credit card by going into a store somewhere. We've taken that and put it onto the internet. So catalog shopping, the retail experience has now been kind of replaced with the e-commerce experience. Instead of going to a supermarket or a bookstore, you can go to Amazon. Instead of going to Blockbuster, you can go to Netflix. If you want to book a hotel, you can do that through any number of booking sites, or you can even book someone else's apartment through something like Airbnb. Uber, Netflix, eBay, all of these businesses are enabled by this one fundamental innovation of the World Wide Web as the browsing experience to find the thing that you want, and a little bit of cryptography so that you can send your credit card number to somebody. And off the back of this, it sounds pretty simple, but off the back of this, we get several of the world's largest companies by market cap come directly out of that innovation. We also get Google and Facebook coming out of that because they exist to advertise to that market of people, all of those people sitting at home with a web browser and a credit card. The Google and Facebook business model is to figure out who those people are, figure out what those people want, and advertise to them. And this has created multi-billion dollar companies, and there's now a race on between the world's largest technology companies to see which will be the first to get to $1 trillion market cap. The current speculation is maybe Amazon will get there first. And it's worth remembering that Amazon's entire thing is that they know what your credit card details are, and they have a giant selection of products that you can buy. So what can't you do inside that paradigm? What things are not a good fit for the web and the little bit of cryptography that lets you send your credit card details? Well, most businesses don't actually make their purchases using credit cards. They use purchase orders and invoices. Most finance isn't done using a credit card. If you want to take out some insurance, if you want to take out a loan, the web and credit card kind of paradigm isn't a very good way of doing it. Because the web is very good at this kind of ephemeral, you kind of look, you see that the product is available and you buy it kind of experience, which mirrors the shopping experience. You see something you like in the shop, but you come back next week and it might not be there anymore. But for things like invoices, for things like insurance contracts, they live over a much longer time period. An invoice might take 90 days to pay. And it might fall under a contractual framework, a master services agreement, or a longer-term contract that may run for years. If you take out insurance on your home or on your car, it may be years before you make a claim. How many websites can guarantee that a web page that you see today is still going to be there years from now? There is no real assumption that web pages last for a very long time, or that they make any guarantees that the information you can see today is going to be there tomorrow. We have things like the Wayback Machine and archive.org, which kind of do their best to keep copies of old web pages. But pretty much anything over a certain age is now gone. Very few things that were there 20 years ago are still there. But there are definitely people who took mortgages out 20 years ago who've still got those mortgages. So what we need to be able to address other areas of the economy outside of retail is something that is a better fit for those kinds of systems. We need something that can store information for the long term. We need something that has a notion of who are the signatories, who are the parties to a contract, or who are the recipient and the sender of an invoice, or who are the parties to an insurance contract or a master services agreement. Many of those things are conditional, so with an insurance contract, you don't know if you're ever going to make a claim. In the best case scenario, you never have to, which is very unlike a credit card payment where you have a very distinct expectation about exactly what's going to happen, and you expect it to happen pretty quickly. So our kind of key criteria are long-term storage, some notion of who the parties are with some kind of signature system, and some ability to model conditional events that are going to happen based on logic. This sounds an awful lot like a blockchain. If you look at the Ethereum blockchain, it has long-term storage, digital signatures so that every record that appears on the blockchain has originated and been signed by a private key, and you can model the conditionality in smart contracts. You can write logic in a smart contract the same way you would write logic into a legal contract. So our prediction and our view is that this gives rise to what we call the Internet of Agreements. Just as the web was the perfect technology to bring shopping onto the internet, the blockchain enables us to bring invoices, enables us to bring insurance contracts, it enables us to bring supply chains, personal finance, business to business, all of those areas of the economy that are quite difficult to model just using the web become much easier to model when you have things that look a bit like blockchains. And this turns out to be a much larger share of the world economy than retail is. So the stakes here are extremely high. We're just coming to the end, I think, of a sort of 20-year cycle of moving all of the shopping stuff from the offline world into the online world. There isn't going to be another Amazon, there isn't going to be another Uber, there isn't going to be another eBay, there isn't going to be another Airbnb. We've kind of got our major big brands, our major big institutions of online retail, but we don't yet have our major online institutions of banking, of insurance. We don't have the new competitors in a whole series of spaces in business to business, in supply chain. We don't know who is the kind of the Amazon of this new era yet. We don't know who's the Google or who is the Facebook. But if the past is any guide, we are at the beginning of a process that is going to end 10, 15, 20 years from now with massive multi-billion-dollar companies being born, huge reworking of how our economies work, how our techno-social systems operate, and it's going to be in these areas. We're going to go into finance, we're going to go into supply chains, we're going to go into insurance, we're going to go into all forms of interpersonal and intercompany contracts, because we now have the technological tools that enable us to do it, which we just simply didn't have 20 years ago. So when we talk about the Internet of Agreements, this is the process that we are talking about. We are talking about the process of rewiring the world, essentially, onto a new technological platform. And the reason we're doing it now rather than doing it 20 years ago is that we didn't have the technology to do it 20 years ago. So in each of these conferences, we've looked at areas where this new technology intersects with other systems. So in our first conference, we looked at the intersection between this technology and the legal world. In our second conference, we looked at world trade. And in this one, we want to look at identity. Because if you want to make an agreement with somebody on the internet using a technical system, you need to know who that person is. Specifically, you need to know that if they don't do what it is that they promised you, that you can get some kind of recourse against them. And if we're completely honest, the internet has always been pretty bad at this kind of thing. Economists like to talk about high-trust societies and low-trust societies. And in a high-trust society, there are good institutions. You can rely on people. If you make an agreement with someone, you can expect that they're going to keep it because everybody kind of knows that there are rules, and those rules tend to be enforced, either by social systems or by the law. The internet has always had that kind of air of Wild West about it. And generally speaking, if you receive an email with a business proposition and a contract that somebody would like you to sign, you'd be pretty well advised not to sign it. It's probably from a Nigerian prince, and they're probably offering you great rewards for conducting this activity. And we don't have a very good way of allowing that person to prove that they really are a Nigerian prince and that they really do have millions in a vault somewhere, and they just need you as a specific individual to help them to recover their money. It's very hard for them to prove these things. We have one set of approaches of doing this, which is the kind of Facebook approach, which is to collect a huge amount of self-declared information about people, to look at their social networks. We're seeing, I think, right now in the news, the downsides of that approach, the fact that it doesn't work very well for a whole bunch of things. A lot of the people on there are not who they claim to be. They may, in fact, be paid agents of a state or of an organization that exists to try and influence you. And if you are a real person, you really don't want to be disclosing all of your information completely accurately to Facebook, simply to for the benefit of being allowed to poke people or post on walls or whatever it is that you do. So we are kind of at a situation where, in order to do real business, we need some kind of breakthrough in identity. We need a way of making this work. And the traditional tech person's approach to this kind of thing is to think of one amazingly elegant system that works for all possible use cases, with perfect privacy and perfect security, but also perfect disclosure of information to everybody else where you want to have it. And I think what we've learned from the past is that that perfection is very, very hard to achieve. We could achieve perfect knowledge of who everybody is and what they do and their claims if we're willing to accept total surveillance of absolutely everything, everybody's relationships with everybody else and everybody's activities. But in reality, we don't want that. So we have to accept that this is a situation where people want to defraud other people. There are bad actors. It's an adversarial system. It's the Wild West out there. And the blockchain space is a very good example of this. We see regular scams and frauds, misrepresentations, people posing as other people, people inventing entire other identities, people inventing whole teams. Plenty of ICOs have gone out with pictures of Hollywood actors as the team members, fake identities, fake LinkedIn profiles. This stuff happens all the time. I've even seen people impersonating me, which is not a thing that I ever expected, but it has happened. The first time it happened, I thought it was really flattering. I thought, wow, I've arrived. I'm at the point where now someone thinks it's worth impersonating me. By about the fifth time it happened, it was less amusing. So we have this very difficult path that we have to find. If we go down one approach, we have the Wild West, caveat emptor, buyer beware. If we go down another path, we have perfect surveillance. Absolutely everybody is being snooped on at all times in order to make sure that you are who you say you are. We need to find that middle path, which is to allow people to trust each other, or to at least to trust the information that they're being presented, without necessarily requiring scanned copies of everybody's passports before they'll even talk to them. And we've been doing some work. Vinay has been pioneering this idea on an intellectual level, and we've begun to put together a consortium to discuss whether it's possible to use insurance as a mechanism to bridge this gap, such that rather than having to verify every single aspect of another person's information before you'll deal with them, it's possible for that person to insure that information, so they can present a set of insured facts to you, and you at that point are relying on the due diligence of the insurer rather than having to perform all of that due diligence yourself. This is one approach. I'm sure we're going to hear from other people who've got other ideas about how these things could be done. But what this event exists for is a forum to bring together people from the tech world, from the world of finance, from the world of law, from the world of government, and further afield, to try and get those perspectives out, to try and work out how do we move forward. And throughout the course of today, I think we're going to hear from people who are building identity products, from people who understand the legal and compliance requirements, from people who are in the insurance world, and they're going to present their understanding and their perspective, and hopefully in the discussions that happen around the conference, we can try and form that into a cohesive view that everybody understands. I think I've probably run slightly over time, so I'm going to conclude here. But I'm greatly looking forward to the conversations today. I'm hoping that I get a chance to speak to pretty much everybody here. So please come and talk to me about what Mattereum is doing or about the Identity Insurance Consortium. And I hope you all have a wonderful and stimulating day. Thank you.